Welcome to today's edition of Author's Corner, brought to you by KNEO 91.7 FM The Word. I'm Roberta Foster, and today I welcome back to Author's Corner Debbie Barr, and she has written the book Caregiving, Taking Care of Yourself While Caring for Someone Else, and it's published by Aspire Press. She'll tell you more about how to find this book and her other books as we get towards the end of the program. A little bit about Debbie. She is an author and speaker with a passion for encouraging people to engage deeply with God as they journey through tough times. She's a master certified health education specialist with degrees in journalism and health education. And she lives over in North Carolina and tells me she's been spared from the disasters of the storms. And so, Debbie, thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, Roberta, thank you so much for having me.
Well, one of the points that was brought out in your book is that 1 out of 5 Americans is now a caregiver. And the statistic says it's about 53 million people. Why are those statistics so high?
Well, I think there are probably a lot of reasons for that, but I would suggest maybe the biggest one is just the aging of the baby boomers.
Okay.
And the fact that, so many older adults, do need the care of a family member, and sometimes there are certain conditions that tend to kick in only with age, primarily things like Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's disease, and so it's just created, a bigger population than in the past.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel that more people are actually taking the responsibility upon themselves again? It seemed like there was a time that if anybody got sick, they automatically went into a nursing home and the families weren't quite so involved. Has the tide turned a little bit to where more families are taking care of their loved ones?
Well, statistics tell us that 9 out of 10 caregivers are taking care of a relative. So I think part of the reason it's better to, do that from home is some of the cost of care in a facility is really, really pretty high. And so a lot of families decide that they will do it, at least for as long as they possibly can at home. I think that's part of the reason.
Yeah. Well, your book is about caregiving, and the subtitle, Taking Care of Yourself While Caring for Someone Else. So why is it important that people look to taking care of themselves while caring for somebody else? Some might say, well, it's automatic you take care of yourself, but apparently that's not the case. Well,
long-term caregiving is pretty different. Short-term caregiving, if you're taking care of somebody with a broken leg, it's not going to change your life that much. There's a time element that's going to resolve and life will go on. But if you're a long-term caregiver, if you're doing this for 5 years or 10 years, in some cases longer, it can seriously deplete a person physically and emotionally. And caregivers are only human, like the rest of us.
Right.
They need sleep, they need exercise, they need spiritual nurture, and they definitely need time off. And if those physical or emotional needs are ignored, sooner or later, that caregiver will be unable to go on meeting the needs of that person. So I advocate for caregivers making their own self-care a top priority, because unless they do, they're at risk for burning out or bailing out or even getting sick themselves. And, the question that comes to mind then is, well, where would that leave that person they're caring for? So, a well-rested, healthy caregiver keeps their emotional and physical reserves from running out, which is what enables them to be that patient, loving, truly caring caregiver they really want to be.
Now, there are people that do this caregiving as their occupation. So I'm guessing that your book is written more toward of family members that take on that responsibility.
Yes, definitely. And many family members don't really have any particular training or personal experience that really equips them for this. And so it's definitely on-the-job training.
Yeah.
And they may not have any idea what to expect, and they may not have much help. And their lives may change dramatically, depending on the severity of the caregiving situation. So very different scenario than a professional caregiver who does have training, who does have support, who gets breaks, lunch breaks, days off. Different altogether when it's, family caregiving.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things you talk about in your book is that caregiving needs to become a team sport. So talk to us about what you mean there.
Well, when caregiving is high stress and long-term, it's not a job for just one person. It usually takes a team of people to do that, to do it well. And it's a friend of mine who has coined that term, caregiving is a team sport, but I think he nailed it. Caregiving is a team sport, and you can't play a team sport by yourself.
Right.
So it's wise to start thinking about the kind of team you're going to need long before you actually do need one, before caregiving becomes physically exhausting or excessively time-consuming, or when medically it's been, told to you that this person will not recover, they're going to decline. It's really wise to start to put together a team of people who can help you when the load gets a little heavier.
Well, we'll ask Debbie to elaborate a little bit more on how to find that team or create that team in just a moment. Let me remind you, I'm talking with Debbie Barr regarding her book, Caregiving, Taking Care of Yourself While Caring for Someone Else. It's published by Aspire Press, and you're listening to Author's Corner. I'm Roberta Foster. So, Debbie, tell us a little bit more about what type of people, how do you find the people, a little bit more about who should be involved in this team for caregiving.
In the book, I go into that in quite a bit of detail because a lot of people say, well, yeah, a team would be great, but where do I start? Who do I ask? How do I ask them? How do you do that schedule-wise? So all those details are kind of laid out in the book.
Great.
And of course, every situation is different. Some people automatically have lots of family help, so they don't need a big team. But some people really don't have any family help or support, and so those are the people who might benefit the most. I would like to just say that it's unfortunate, but there are caregivers who really do need help, but they won't build a team. They continue to try to do it all by themselves, and usually that's for one of three bad reasons.
Okay.
One of those bad reasons is they believe nobody else can do the job as well as they can.
Yeah, okay.
Or they think nobody else should help because they have a belief that it is their sole responsibility to care for their spouse or, another family member. Or then just simply pride, they're embarrassed or ashamed to admit that they need help. None of those is a good reason for not putting together a team of people to help.
Yeah.
And so what I would say to anybody who's listening who is allowing one of those things to stop them, I would say this. You have done many kind things through the years to help other people, and now it's your turn to be on the receiving end. So don't hesitate to ask for help.
I've even heard it myself because I cared for my dad for a while. Thankfully, his care was very minimal on my part. But people will say, well, if you need anything, let me know. What would you suggest a friend say to someone that they know is a caregiver rather than, well, if you need anything, let me know?
I would suggest never saying that.
Right?
because almost always it's kind of a way for that person to check the box, I've offered help, But the caregiver is in a very awkward position because they don't know what kind of time you have, what kind of resources you have, what you're really able and willing to do. So what I would suggest for the friend is to say something very specific, like, for example, I have a free afternoon on Thursday. I'd like to, get with you and do something either with you or for you. Like, here's some alternatives. I could bring a snack and come over and we can just chat, because caregiving can be very lonely sometimes. Or you can say, I've got those 4 hours on Thursday afternoon. How about if I come over and do a chore for you, or do a chore with you? Or how about I'll just sit with the person you care for, and you can go take a nap, you can go for a walk, you can take a bubble bath, you can read a book, just to give that person some downtime. Yeah. Or you can say, I'm going to take you to lunch, and I'm going to pay someone to sit with your person for a couple of hours. To be as specific as possible, but also to be sensitive. What do they really need?
Yeah.
And so the gift of your time is one of the most loving and sincere things I think we could do. But apart from that, hey, send them a text. Tell them they're doing an awesome job, that what they're doing is important work. Bring them some fresh cut flowers. Say, can I run errands for you? Can I pick up prescriptions? There's all kinds of specific things that the caregiver can respond to much better than this generic, hey, call me if you need me.
Right. Very good. Very good. Well, in your book, you talk about there being upsides and downsides to caregiving. What would you see as some of the upsides? We'll leave our conversation on a positive note there.
Well, I would say, it's interesting. The statistics and the surveys that have been done with caregivers, so many caregivers say that caregiving gives them such a sense of purpose. They feel that caring for this other person makes their life more meaningful. And especially people who are now taking care of someone who once took care of them, maybe as a baby or a child. Just saying it gives them such a sense of satisfaction to kind of, pay that back to that person. And a large percentage of people in surveys say that they have a real sense of pride for having done the right thing for their loved one. And of course, for most family caregivers, the bottom line is they're doing it out of love.
Well, and then there will someday be a hard decision, and you write that what is the hardest decision that caregivers sometimes have to make?
That hard decision comes when the caregiver realizes that their loved one's needs now exceed their ability to meet them.
Yeah.
And so that hard decision is whether to place that loved one in a group home or a memory care unit or a skilled nursing facility, someplace where they can get more intensive care. And, the family has to consider what would be best for this loved one and what would be best for the family, considering the cost of the care and how far away from the family that person might not be. And so it can be a very emotional and difficult decision because it can trigger a lot of guilt. Like, how can we do this to Mama? We know she wouldn't want this. So it's really tough. But the best advice I've ever heard about this came from a geriatrician. And a geriatrician, for listeners who might not know, a geriatrician is kind of like a pediatrician, just at the opposite end of life. So this particular geriatrician has counseled many caregivers who are wrestling with the guilt of placing their loved one in a facility. And her advice basically came down to this. If guilt feelings arise, acknowledge them, but push past them to do what's best for your loved one. Because, keeping that person safe and ensuring their best care really is the most loving thing you can do for them.
Right. Well, today I've been talking with Debbie Barr about her book, Caregiving, Taking Care of Yourself While Caring for Someone Else. So, Debbie, tell our listeners how they can find more about this book and others that you've written.
Probably the easiest way to do that is to go to my website, which is just Debbie Barr, and Barr is B-A-R-R, debbiebarr.com. This book is featured there, and I've written 2 others related to caregiving. So there is a page where all 3 caregiving-related books are together. I would say the plus of this book is it's very small. It's what I would call a mini book, and a mini book has a mini price. And so it's a very affordable little book that will help that person put themselves at a higher priority than maybe they're currently doing, to their own hurt. That's one benefit of the smaller than usual book.
All right. Well, today this interview is with Debbie Barr regarding her book, Caregiving, Taking Care of Yourself While Caring for Someone Else, published by Aspire Press. Debbie, thank you so much for sharing your time and your heart with our listeners.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed our conversation very much.
And if you missed any part of today's interview or would just like to hear it again, you can now find it on your favorite podcast platform or through kneo.org. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. This is Roberta Foster on the Author's Corner. Join me again next time.
Never miss your favorite show again. For more than 30 years, KNEO has been bringing you great Bible teachers on a local and national level. And now, we've made it easier than ever to hear from these great men and women of God. KNEO's entire lineup is now available to listen anytime, anywhere, through our website. Go to kneo.org/podcast to see all the options. You can search for programs alphabetically, or you can select individual categories like culture, kids, leadership, or music. We even have a category just for locally produced programs, so you can hear from pastors and spiritual leaders located right here in the 4-state area. And all these resources are absolutely free. KNEO's mission is to get God's Word in front of you, and this is one of the ways we do it. Give it a try today. Go to kneo.org and click on the podcast tab to get started.